Hello and welcome to our next YouTube video. In this tutorial we're going to be building custom CSS checkbox. In most cases you may come across default checkboxes on different websites, but after watching this video you will be able to create a really nice and modern checkbox. So here, as you can see, we have a box, and if I click it, then it will be checked with some nice effects. The subject of this tutorial is to create just this custom checkbox, so that's why I don't have here any other content. Also, I decided to create a checkbox with the large size for better visibility, but of course you can make it smaller for your own projects. Alright, let's go ahead and start building this little project. In VS Code I have two different files, index.html and style.css. In index.html file I have prepared a basic structure of HTML document. I have linked here HTML and CSS files. Let's go ahead and start creating HTML markup. Let's open development. It should be a wrapper for checkbox, so let's assign to it class checkbox wrapper. Inside that development we need to pass two elements, input and label. So let's open input element. Let's make its type as checkbox. Then create label. Next that we have to do is to link label and input elements in order to create click event. For that we have to assign to an input ID attribute, and the values of ID and for attributes must be the same. So let's pass here check. Then assign to input element ID attribute with value check. Now, in order to demonstrate that label and input elements are linked, I'm going to pass here some content. Let's say check. So if I click this word, then the checkbox will be checked. So that's it, what we can achieve by ID and for attributes, and that's the trick which will help us to create click event. Okay, let's get rid of this word from here. The last thing that I want to do inside the HTML document is to assign to label class name checkmark. Alright, let's go to style.css file and start writing some styles. We don't have here lots of HTML elements, but anyway I'm going to create some reset styles. Let's select every element using asterisk and then set margin and padding as 0. Then select checkbox wrapper. Actually, I'm going to place checkbox perfectly in the center of the page. For that, I'm going to use one of the techniques, centering elements with the help of positions and transform. So we have to write here position absolute. Then we need to set top and left properties both as 50%. And then in order to center element perfectly, we have to use transform with translate, which should have two values, minus 50% and again minus 50%. Alright, so as you can see, now the checkbox is perfectly centered on the page. Actually, I'm not going to customize this checkbox. Eventually it should be hidden. We're going to create a box using a label element. This input element will just help us to create click event. So let's go ahead and select label with the class name checkmark. As you know, in general, the label element is an inline element, and if we want to apply to inline element width and height, then at first we should transform it into either inline block or block level element. So let's write here display block, then set width and height both as 80 pixels. And also change background color. Let's make it light gray using DDD. So as you can see, we have here box. Let's make its corners slightly rounded using border radius with value 10 pixels. Alright, that's it. The box is created, and now we have to take care of checkmark sign. At first, let's go ahead and create it using after pseudo element. And then after that we will take care of click event. So let's select checkmark with after pseudo element. First of all, I'm going to change background of label element. I'm doing it just for a while. Eventually, we will change the background color on click. So let's change background color for the label right here. 0, 8, B, B, 6, 8. And then let's start working on after pseudo element. At first define content and make it empty. Actually, the checkmark sign should be created by borders. At first, let's define a position as absolute. And in order to position element according to its parent element, we have to assign to its parent position relative. Next, let's define width and height. Set width as 25 pixels. As for height, let's assign to it 45 pixels. And now, in order to make the element visible, and actually in order to create checkmark sign, let's use borders. I'm going to define borders for two different sides, for right and for bottom. So let's write here border right and assign to it values 5 pixels, solid, and the color white. Then duplicate this line of code and change right into bottom. Now, as you can see, the element is visible, but as you guessed, we have to take care of its position. We're going to place it in the center, and also we need to rotate it in order to make it look like checkmark sign. So let's define top position as 40%. Then we need left 50%. And then use again transform, translate with values minus 50%. And again minus 50%. Okay, now the only thing that we have to do is to rotate element according to the z-axis, and then we will get needed result. So let's write rotate z and insert here 40 degrees. So now you can see that we have here checkmark sign, and now it's time to make it work. First of all, let's change background color on click. For that, let's get back here previous background color, light gray. Then in order to create click event, I'm going to use pseudo class called checked. It allows us to define styles and apply them to element when the checkbox is checked. So let's select input element with ID check. Then add here pseudo class called checked. Then we need to select label element. As you know, it's placed right after input element in the index.html file. And in order to select label, I'm going to use one of the CSS combinators called general sibling selector, which is expressed by tilde sign. And now we need the class name of element, right checkmark. Let's pass here background color with the value 0, 8, B, B, 6, 8. Okay, so if I click the box, then background color will be changed. Let's make this effect smoother using transition. Let's assign to it values background color and duration 0.4 seconds. So now it looks much better, and actually it's time to work on checkmark sign. By default, I'm going to make it hidden. Let's do that using opacity 0. And now we should display it when we check the checkbox. We're going to do it using the same technique which we used just a minute ago. So let's grab this selector from here. Then add after pseudo element because we should display checkmark sign. And now insert here opacity 1. And also use the transition to make effect smoother. Assign to it all and 0.4 seconds. So now if I click, then everything will work fine. And actually we already have here nice effects. The checkbox is working. But before we finish this tutorial, I want to add to checkbox some other effects. By default, I'm going to make checkmark sign larger. And then on click, we will give it its default size. And this eventually will look quite good. So let's go ahead and add to transform property function called scale, which allows us to manage the size of an element. Let's insert here 10. So it means that we just made element 10 times bigger than it was before. And now on click we have to make it again smaller. So I'm going to grab this entire line of code. We need all of these functions because if we just use transform scale, then those two functions, I mean translate and rotate, will be overwritten and it will break position of the checkmark sign. So let's change the value of scale, make it 1. And now you can see that we have here really nice effect. Okay, we are almost done. The only thing that we have to do is to hide input elements. And I'm going to do that using HTML attribute called hidden. So let's assign it to input element. Alright, so now we are done. Everything works perfectly and our little project is finished. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned some cool tricks using CSS. So if you like this tutorial, then please subscribe to our channel, thumbs up, comment, and click the bell to get notifications on every newly uploaded video. Okay, see you in the next tutorial.